My name is Eric Mintel. By night, I'm a professional jazz musician, but by even later at night, I investigate the paranormal. I, along with my team at Bucks County Paranormal Investigations, travel the country investigating all things paranormal. This is Bucks County Paranormal Investigations. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Eric Mintel. Welcome to Bucks County Paranormal Investigations, the interviews. And I'm really excited today because I've got my guest who I've been wanting to have on the show for a while, Paul Bartholomew. He's coming to us from Whitehall, New York. And Paul is a paranormal researcher, Bigfoot researcher, anything paranormal. And what I love about Paul is we met on Facebook. And what I love about the Facebook posts, he'll always put some detailed information on a lot of the different encounters that have happened in his area. And I think that's important because, we drive by these places all the time and people have no clue on what has happened. So there's a rich history of paranormal all over the country. So Paul, I'm so glad that you're here today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
I know we've been trying to get this together for a while, so we had a snow day today and we're doing it. So, you've been researching the paranormal for years now. I guess like around 45 years, you had said. And, I always like to say, first of all, there is always stories, the Bigfoot stories go back thousands of years, and there's always got to be some kind of truth to the folklore. And would you agree to that?
Absolutely. And particularly with the Sasquatch and Bigfoot phenomena, if you look at it from a global enigma, the Che-Ren in China, the El-Misti and the former, Soviet Union and so forth. This is a global enigma. And what separates this from some of the modern cryptozoology is if you take like the chupacabra, the goat sucker reports from Puerto Rico and Texas and Florida and so forth, you may be able to trace one back to the early 70s, but by and large, that phenomena began about the mid 1990s forward. And so that has a starting point. This, the Bigfoot phenomena can be traced back thousands of years. In this region in the Northeast, where we have the Algonquin and the Iroquois, and we have legends of stone giants or giant men of the mountains. Samuel Champlain talked about the Gugu. This creature that the natives had talked to him about. So this is a rich history in this particular region. And that's kind of what separates the Sasquatch phenomena from some of the other cryptid reports.
You've been researching. Now, I just want to get into it because, you have put some really, really cool things on Facebook, and just it has been fascinating to me. And you up in Whitehall, New York, had an unbelievable encounter in the 70s of, I guess it was Bigfoot on the Abair Road, and it was the Abair Road incident. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. That was back in August of 1976. It's a rural road, very rural Whitehall. And now there's a few houses in the area. But back then it was even more desolate because there were fewer people out that way. So the Abair Road incident was an encounter that happened between two teens initially, and then they were joined by a third teen. And if we sort of summarize it, they saw this creature walking near a telephone pole out on Abair Road. So they sped out, returned to town. Back then in the 1970s, it was a different time. Now all the calls go through county. Back then, you used to have a dispatcher on duty at night, every night, and he would answer calls at the police station. So the dispatcher on duty would have been Bob Martell. And, he confirms all this incident as it happened. And the boys the teenagers came into the police station and proclaimed, what they had seen. So they responded by sending out the Whitehall police, the New York State troopers, and a Washington County deputy sheriff. So they all respond out to Abair Road. And over the course of about a week-long period there, we had maybe as many as a dozen sightings. Now, Seth Breedlove came to Whitehall, and he shot a documentary, and he turned up even more witnesses or potential witnesses.
Wow.
So this is, several decades old investigation that still is turning up more information.
I know that we've got some pictures here that we're showing of what the creature looked like. Now this was
drawn by who? Who was this just testimony from the teenagers about what they saw?
Well, there's an individual picture that Eric Miner did of the Whitehall creature.
Okay.
And it shows it walking next to the telephone pole, and that was used for the cover of one of our books. That was a fairly accurate description of what the creature looked like. Now, there's another drawing that has two images, front and a side, and that was done by a student that came up here, and she drew out based on eyewitness testimony what this creature looked like. And that one, the only thing that isn't depicted in either one of those drawings is the red glowing eyes, which was one of the characteristics. Now, if we want to further entangle this tale, over that week-long period, we had so many different people who had sightings. It actually ended on a road off of Abair Road called Carver's Falls Road. And what had happened is two hunters, a father and a son, they drove to the Whitehall and ran into the police station and said, "We just shot Bigfoot." And on duty was Bob Martell. They responded to the scene, New York State Police, and they found the troopers, they found shotgun shell out where they had said that they had shot at this huge creature that came at them on Sea Falls Road. And this is all entered into the police log. I held the police book in my hands, and that's how it was entered. So that's how the incident ended, was this creature came at them, they shot at it, and then the sightings sort of dissipated. Now, to further convolute this paranormal phenomena, because people would like to say this is a creature outbreak. Well, this was during a major UFO flap, particularly in this area, in the counties of Shushan and the neighboring communities of Granville. And when I researched it, August of 1976, you can trace sightings all the way down to Rockland County, towards New York City. So this whole Northeast was besieged by UFO sightings at the exact same time. Now, when I interviewed Bob Martell, and we'll throw even more fuel on the flames here of the paranormal, he said that within a week of the sightings, he wasn't sure if it was a week before or a week after, but was within a week of the Abair Road sighting, that he's at the police station, and they got a call that on 2nd Avenue in Whitehall. Now, this is a ridiculous area because it's all houses. He said, a woman said an object has just landed in her yard. And now the police station's only two streets over. So they said, hey, we'll be right there. They jumped in, went right over. And when they got there, she said, and she's a very reputable woman, didn't want any publicity about it. She confirmed that something landed in her yard and then took off again. And Bob Martell said he went over to the spot, and there was a circular patch of matted down grass. And when he reached down, he could still feel the heat coming off of this matted down area. And of course, that was typical of many of the 1970s CE2 cases, including one that occurred at the La Cabana restaurant up here in Glen Lake in 1973.
I wanted to ask you about that one too, but now I'm going to throw some more fuel on the fire here, because now go back to 1973, 74, they had the same thing here in central Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh. I interviewed Stan Gordon, and same thing happened, Bigfoot and UFO sightings. I mean, there were thousands of reports that were coming in. So, and now that's a couple of years earlier, but here we are just a couple of years later, and the same thing is happening here. So that was the other thing, because I always thought that there was a Bigfoot UFO connection as it was anyway. I always had that thought, because you would always have these reports of people seeing the creature and then also seeing a UFO at the same time. So there was some kind of are they interdimensional? That was the whole other thing too. Because then they disappear. Are they going into another dimension? What's happening? But the restaurant was another one I wanted you to tell us about, because the UFO landed in the parking lot or something right in the front of the restaurant.
Yeah, that was, it became a fairly well-known case for this area, a legendary case, front page of the newspaper and so forth, just like the Abair Road incident appeared on the front page of the Post-Star. So what happened basically, that was December 12th, they believe. It could have been the 13th. It was right around that time frame. And the owner came to the restaurant because it had been closed the night before, and he found that area of dirt that had been swirled, and it was actually thrown against the door, so much so that he had to get a shovel and shovel it away from the door to get in. Now, people heard this whirling sound and they couldn't explain it. They said it wasn't weather related. There's no weather phenomena, and that it was, it sounded mechanical. It's an absolutely bizarre spot for anything to land, like a helicopter or anything. Doesn't seem feasible. But there's an added element here that puts this in a different category, because, okay, you have an interesting phenomena occur. Well, the hot water taps ran cold and the cold water taps ran hot. It happened for about a month or so, a few weeks after, and then it went back to normal. So there was an actual phenomena that occurred there that, you couldn't hox it.
Almost like a reverse polarity type thing.
Yeah. It was, some people felt that perhaps it was an electromagnetic field that had somehow, affected the valves of the water. And so that was a very fascinating effect. And you got to remember that 1973 period is special. And if you go back, that's when Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson had their encounter in Pascagoula. That's when the coin helicopter case happened in Ohio. And I had just, it's funny, we're on the same level because I had just pulled out files all from 73. And they're over on the other side, but they're about that thick. And, so, I mean, it was a very wild UFO time period, a very major UFO flap. And I remember it vividly.
Oh, I was, and I was young, but, back then, I mean, I interviewed Calvin too. And he, to this day, is adamant about what happened to him. And, and you could tell when you're talking to somebody, you could tell whether they're BSing you or not. This guy he was still still upset about it. And he just wanted answers. He still has not had any answers to this day of what it was, what he saw, what he encountered. And it's just so bizarre. And those are, and there are so many reports that people have not even, I think now that, the government is kind of like, releasing a lot of the Tic Tac UFO videos from the Navy pilots. And I think the general consensus now, where it was different back then, I think you've got a very large majority of the public that is more open-minded to this. So they're, not as afraid to talk about it, and then all of a sudden when other people are talking about it, then other people come forward and say, well, that happened to me too. And then it becomes this global phenomenon.
Absolutely. In years past, people like Calvin, people like the police officers involved with Whitehall, they had to face that ridicule factor. And, these are very credible people. They encountered incredible things, and yet they couldn't talk about them or they would be ridiculed. And nowadays it seems to have turned around a bit. Back when the Abair Road incident happened, the town was split, and half were kind of with them, half were, well, it must be a hoax. But it was a very negative experience to have happened. In fact, a couple of years later, Dan Gordon, because this is another police encounter, in 1982 was traveling, if you're heading towards Ticonderoga, that way towards South Bay of Whitehall, North Whitehall. If you were to head that way, they were on patrol at 4:30 in the morning, and a creature crossed the road in front of their cruiser. Wow. He pulled over, drew his weapon, tried to chase it. It was long gone. The other police officers with him confirms the sighting. He stayed in the car. That's a tough case to explain because you've got trained police officers. They didn't want to encounter this. They didn't even believe in it.
Yeah, right.
And it changed their lives. And they couldn't talk about it for 22 years before Dan finally came forward. And so that's what we're dealing with. Those are what I call confirmation sightings. Right. These are people that, you get a lot of people that say, well, I heard something behind me. But when you get to the meat of the report, there really isn't anything there. They heard a twig snap, or they heard a vocalization. They thought they heard this. These are this is right in your face as it happens, life-changing events. Exactly. And when you have a sighting like that, and I'll give you another example. Cliff Sparks, who ran the country club in Whitehall, he had a sighting a year before Abair. So here we're establishing this long pattern of sightings. And he didn't talk about it for a year. And the only reason we got that encounter is because we were friends of the family. My dad was a farmer, and he was a farmer. And so a lot of people knew my dad, and they would talk to us. And he saw this red-eyed creature, 7-8 feet tall. It was on green number 1. And this is in May of 75. And he's got a dog with him on this cart that he's driving out to the greens to maintain at night, about 11:30 p.m. And this creature, he drove up on it, and they had a quick stare, and then the creature stared at the dog. Now, the dog usually was rambunctious and would get out and run around. The dog succumbed and just hung over the edge of the cart. And he said that was very unusual. And of course, he was extremely, frightened.
Sure.
And he said he felt the creature was as scared of it as he was scared of him. Wow. And he said that the creature turned, and he said it moved sloth-like, and it crashed through the brush there. And so this is a sighting that occurred before Abair. Dan Gordon's is a sighting that occurred after Abair. And if you start researching this, you go in each direction.
Oh yeah.
And you have a long history of sightings.
I mean, let's not forget, up in that area, the White Mountains, we've got the Betty and Barney Hill incident in 1961. Right. So that's not that terribly far away either. And I interviewed Betty's niece, Kathleen Martin, and unbelievable what they went through. And it just, I mean, all of this, you keep going back and back and back forward. It's all there. What I wanted to ask you too about the Abair Road incident. Now, did they collect any evidence beside the photo? Did they get any prints, any hair samples, do you know of, or anything like that?
There was a casting made within a week by Deputy Sheriff. And to the best of my knowledge, he just sort of put it away, didn't want anything to do with it, because it was such a negative experience back then.
Yeah, I see.
Now it's sort of come full circle. And a lot of this research, you look at Abair and you go, wow, a creature outbreak. But now we've got the UFO phenomena. We can also throw in Big Bird or Pterodon or Thunderbird report that occurred in Whitehall at the same time. So we've got all this phenomena going on in this, what I call it a paranormal outbreak rather than a creature sighting. So we just have this manifestations. The best way I can explain this after 45 years of looking into it is what John Keel and Brad Steiger talked about with, we have manifestations from the same source phenomena. And it sounds like a difficult concept, but it isn't if we equate it to something that's common. Let's say water, and we take water, and I could take water and throw it against my face, and I can cleanse myself. I can drink it and nourish myself. It's amorphic to describe the shape of it. It's liquidy. So if we take that same thing, H2O, that's the source, and we freeze it, now it's got a finite shape. And if I splash it against my head, I do damage. And, I can't ingest it in that form. And, and so it's affecting me in a completely different way. It's reported in a completely different way. And if I crank up the temperature, and now this ice melts, becomes liquid, and then it becomes fog and mist, now it's a completely different phenomena. But we're dealing with that same H2O, same source phenomena. And I think that these are different manifestations from the same source phenomena. I think Keel was on target. Whether his final conclusions were correct or not, who's to say? But I think people like Brad Steiger, I was blessed to work with Brad on a couple of books, tremendous thinker. And people like Jacques Vallée, who, they just sort of look at this from a different perspective, from an unbiased perspective. Right. And it becomes much more complicated than, oh, these objects are dropping off creatures. No, it's a much more complex. And when you take an initial report like Abair and you start peeling away the layers, all of a sudden you got this onion, and there's more and more, and then it becomes basically overwhelming.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then it becomes more and more. I wonder if that cast is still around. I wonder if they still have it at the station somewhere. Probably long.
It could be. I know it was 19 inches, and we had a picture of it in one of our first books.
Wow.
I've got some castings here.
Oh, great.
And, this is the one from China. This is a duplicate of the Chinese casting.
Now,
This is 19 inches. Let me see if I can back up and get a better.
Yeah, tell us about this one now.
Now, this is one that Dr. Cook brought back of what would be the Che Ren, or the wild man in China. And this is 19 inches. You can see the toe structure up here. But what we get a lot is 19 inches, and we get a lot of 14 inches in Whitehall for whatever reason. Some people theorize full-grown male, full-grown female. I have no idea. But this is the same rough dimensions of what the Whitehall Abair Road cast was. Now, if we look at West Rutland, Vermont, which isn't too far away, we're talking maybe 15 minutes away drive. This is one of 3 that was cast. Shows very distinct toe structure, pressure ridges, and this was found in a gravel road, multiple witnesses, 1985. Wow. And it was one of 3. So, I mean, we've got other examples as well of from Rutland County, from around this area. So we've got physical evidence. I don't know if it proves anything, except that whatever was there left a consistent track. So we have multiple tracks, and yet they are consistent in size.
And how recent is that track that you just showed us there? How recent?
That was from 1985.
Okay.
But I mean, we've had sightings as the most recent was January 2020. Wow. Right here in Whitehall, and we had one a year before that, which was in towards the other side of Whitehall, towards the south side of Whitehall, which I was able to cast. They just weren't very distinct. We had a sighting 2018 right by the Route 4, which has had multiple incidences outside of Whitehall.
There's probably, I would think there's a family group up in that. I think there's family groups all over the country, and I think they're manifesting in certain areas. Even down here in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, there is evidence. I mean, it's evidence. They've got, I'm working with a guy, Eric Spinner, down there, Bigfoot researcher. He has hair samples, castings, and trail cam footage of a juvenile Bigfoot. So there is a family living there.
When you start looking at the different phenomena objectively, and I think that's extremely important, because some people almost treat this like a religion. And you just can't do that. You just got to look at, I know Joe Nickel, nice guy, skeptic. We disagree on things, but we can sit down and have a civil conversation without any difficulty whatsoever. My brother would call himself a sympathetic skeptic, and yet we research the same cases, write books together. So, I mean, there's no problem there as long as you don't let it become a religion.
And even going back to the Stan Gordon incidents back in 1973, they also saw red-eyed Bigfoot. So
yeah, that was one of the characteristics that bothered Cliff the most. And if I'm going to create a story, I'm not going to use that as a detail.
Right, exactly.
That's what really makes it stand out. And he said that it was, and I've had researchers challenge me. They said, well, that's just eye shine. No, you're applying a common thing. This is something different. And when you listen to Cliff, you understand. Unfortunately, Cliff has passed on, but we've got recorded interviews where he describes it very succinctly. And he said that it was almost like short dots coming out. And he said it was like lasers. He says it wasn't reflective. There was nothing to reflect off of. There were no lights on the cart. And he said that when those rays hit the dog's behavior changed. And it appears that Cliff got a really good view of this creature while it was focused on the dog. And that's one of those characteristics, too, that's coming from 1975. So this is early on before even people started to associate this. I think of the cover of the book there, Alien Animals by the Borgs. And it has all the different paranormal animals, all with red glowing eyes. And I think there's something to that. When we looked at the research, we found references to the red eyes, but they would be written in the different vernacular of the time. So it would say something of the sort like, it had eyes like glowing embers. Right. And I said, this is really, this is a consistent aspect to this phenomena.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And even going back to the Patterson-Gimlin footage, I mean, that has been looked at over and over, and I'm just totally convinced that that's real footage, because for years they didn't realize, but then they figured, oh wait, it's a female because you could see the breasts on it, and
Yep.
the way that, just so that you go back to that, and they stood by their story. And I mean, you'll get the skeptic that says, oh, it was somebody in a suit and whatnot. I'm sorry, back then they didn't have suits
No,
or anything like that, any kind of special effects.
well, I mean, the credibility, Gordon Cooper talking about chasing objects. I think he was over in Germany at the time. The credibility's always been there, but they've been able to maintain a ridicule factor. I think it's partly due to poor reporting over the years. And now we've got some really blockbuster reporters like Knapp and stuff, who are really putting the credibility into it. Bruce Maccabee, my goodness.
Right.
I mean, they put in the hours, they put in the necessary study. What Jacques Vallée has looked at is phenomenal, how he's been able to turn things and slant things. And boy, you look at it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that credibility factor is there. I remember Dr. Hynek put out a UFO record one time. UFO is the credibility factor. And that's what it's all about. As long as, you can have that contactee phenomena, and it will put a stain over, some of the stuff, some of the major research advances.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're in an exciting time. Once we get beyond the COVID and move on even further, resources can be put into further study of things like the ATIP program. And isn't it interesting that the Pentagon was interested in things like Skinwalker Ranch?
Right.
I mean, this puts a whole new slant on things. And I think I think what we're dealing with is something extraordinarily complex. Unfortunately, Dr. Hynek didn't get the full answers before he passed away. Stanton Friedman, the same thing, but they did such great work. And, maybe the answer isn't attainable, but boy, it's a lot of fun researching it, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And I mean, it's like, and the theories and everything, you could talk forever on the things, and, and the evidence too, that the evidence is there,
Yes.
And that's one of the things I really want to do is, once we, I mean, we've been doing some video, we've been getting out in the field and being safe, and everything. But I would love to come up to Whitehall and go to that spot and do a video with you talking about and being right there in the actual area. So what's next for you, Paul? What's next for you? What do you got going on next? What's the next case?
Well, we've just got the book out, Mysterious North Woods, which is a compilation that goes up to 2020 cases. Everything you could imagine, from UFOs to horse mutilation cases to the Bigfoot outbreak, hominid, different cryptids, big bird reports. Everything's contained in there. Poltergeist, you name it. It's a smorgasbord of paranormal phenomena for this area. Very tightly written book. Very few wasted words, so it's a pretty easy, painless read.
Paul, this has been unbelievable, fascinating interview, and I mean, so much to talk about. We may have to do a part 2.
Well, anytime, and any chance you get up this way, feel free. Open invitation. And I just want to say that I really enjoy your music posts online. When you played the Lonely Man the other day, I was picturing Bill Bixby pulling up his collar and pulling his bag over and walking, and the hair stood up on my arms. It was so beautifully done. I
appreciate that, man. Yeah, that was one of my favorite shows too, growing up. And I was like, I love the show, but you know what? I waited for that theme song at the end.
Yeah, it was one of those shows that I think Bill Bixby was in a 52-minute episode. He was probably in 49 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, very, very cool. Well, what a pleasure talking with you, man. This is so great meeting you and hearing your stories, and thank you for sharing all of your stories with us. And I'm gonna make sure that people know where they can find you.
I appreciate that, and we'll see you down the road.
You got it, man. Absolutely. Sooner than later.